everyone, and welcome back to Spirit School. I'm so excited to invite amazing medium I've been following for many years, Declan Flynn. How are you, Declan?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me on.
I love it. Yes, I kind of met Declan on Facebook. I think it was 2014. I started following him. It was like year one in my mediumship development, and just so thirsty to follow other working mediums. And so I've been kind of like a fly on Declan's wall. And when I asked him to come onto the podcast, I had to tell him I've been following you for years, but not in the creepy way. I promise. And so I'm really keen to talk. Declan's from Ireland. And so I have some questions about developing mediumship on that side of the world compared to Canada, where I am, and then talk to him as well about his amazing fitness journey and more about his mediumship development. So, but first, I just want to say hi, Declan, and maybe you want to introduce a little bit about yourself to the listeners. That'd be great.
Okay, thank you. I'm from Dublin, and if anyone's ever been over here and you've been to the Guinness Brewery, well, you've missed an opportunity to wave at me at the back garden because I can see right up to the viewing platform. My mediumship journey began in 2004 in California, and at that point, I would have been an atheist, didn't believe in anything. After a period of passings within my family from 92 to 2000, I kind of walked away from being Catholic and my involvement with the church, being an altar boy. And my faith was strong at that point. But after all these valuable people in my life that I loved had passed over, I kind of got angry and then kind of walked away from anything spiritual. But it was a time of need. And I know a lot of people might know of the dark night of the soul expression. And I wasn't going too well in California. And I just asked, okay, Nanny or my cousin, are you there? Are you loving me? Can you help me? And a couple of nights later, I heard my voice. I heard my name being called as clearly as I can hear you speak. And I freaked out. And within a few moments, I was talking to my mother and she said, "Oh, you're hearing your dreams. Go back to sleep." And that because 10:30 at night there, 6:30 in the morning in Dublin. And within a few moments, she phoned me back to say my sister woke up and confirmed that she had a communication in spirit from my cousin to say that she'd been with me. And that started the journey and of exploring and understanding Reiki to begin with, and level 1 and 2, and it was a bit confusing at times. Is it me? Is it them? And I'm making it up. Not it's all in my head. And then gradually, as I progressed and learned and went on courses, I got a interest then in different avenues of mediumship, of communication with spirit on evidential side, and then on trance and healing, up to physical mediumship. So there's a broad spectrum. I never intended to do any of this. It all just happened. But I've enjoyed the journey. It's been 16 years now. It's nearly 17 years now. This year, in the summer, where I first heard the communication. So it's been interesting.
I love that. I have so many questions just based off of what you say, because I've never heard your origin story either, how you get started. I must have joined you 10 years after you started developing. So that's really exciting. Okay, so a couple things. One, you mentioned Reiki. Now, I've interviewed a lot of people on the podcast and I've worked with a lot of different people from different walks of life. And for me, I've seen so many people discover their mediumship abilities through Reiki attunements. Do you think there's something there to that?
Yeah, well, with Reiki, the initial achievements, you're going to raise your vibration. It says sevenfold is the understanding. So you're raising your vibration up, you're opening yourself up that little bit more, and you're becoming more perceptible to energy and vibrations of the people around us on a psychic level. But that can, if you have a mediumship ability, to open you up then to perceive spirit, and it can be a very mild connection. It's like almost you just know there's someone in the room, and that it could be a sense of just a tingly sensation all of a sudden that washes over you. So yeah, that's what happened to me. And I remember having the first attunement and just seeing the color of the room change slightly. And my clairvoyant state was a very juvenile state at that point. And I was just getting a flash of a color change as we were talking about different individuals, angels and spirit walking into the space. But yeah, so that certainly would help people open up and perceive that a little bit more. And years later, about 2 years later, I did the Reiki too, and that helped my increase my awareness. And then in 2011, 2012, a friend of mine, a Reiki master, in tuned me to the level 3, and straight off my clairaudience state got clearer within moments of the attunement. So there is stages that will help people, but that's going to be different for each individual to the depth that that change will happen.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That's a really good explanation because I've never done Reiki myself, and I don't know if I've ever consciously signed up for like a Reiki session before, like to receive one. I've had people say like, "Oh, I sent you Reiki." I'm like, "Awesome!" Like, "Thank you. That's so generous of you." But I've never like sat down for a Reiki session, so I'm always been curious about what people think that connection is. And you just simply said it. It's like raising your vibrations. Like that makes really clear
Yeah.
sense to me. Then,
It's
okay, I
just
love
one
that.
version of a modality that can use just to instigate it. And that I don't use symbols of that when I'm doing Reiki or when I'm doing healing, and that it's just I just a conduit of healing. But yeah, it will help.
Yeah. Okay. So something else I wanted to ask before I go into a little bit more of your development journey here, just based off of what you said. So I love hearing. So you grew up Catholic and then you kind of went against religion in the sense where you went a little bit atheist. I mean, probably confused, like, I don't know what to believe in. Like, is there God? Is there not a God? How does this happen? How was that transition for you? What kind of religion or belief system do you think you have now based off of all your years of mediumship development?
But certainly, I call myself a spiritualist. I certainly like the values of spiritualism as well. Personally, in my own belief, some of the core elements of it are necessary, but other elements need to modernize a little bit old fashioned and antiquated. So I see in a sense of it needs to progress to how the world is now, not how it was initiated over 200 years ago
Mm,
at this point. And Spirit keeps saying to me, if mediumship is to develop, the mediumship itself is to develop. So the philosophy should develop as well. So it's
mm,
supposed to be a thinking man's religion, or person's religion, I should say, be more PC. Um, and that should be the case, that we should always be advancing what our understanding is as well. So yeah, from going from a very strong Catholic background and upbringing, naturally within Ireland, that would
yeah.
be the natural sense of it. But I was curious as well and intrigued by how, and my family's always been around religious orders, not through the church or through my mother's work as well within the local community and adult education, working within a convent setting as well. There's no convent for an adult education. And one of the nuns there even said, and she'd be of a very conservative order, that when she went to my spiritual center I had 2011, 2012, he says you could really feel the closeness of the other world. So there was an
Mm,
openness there. So I do believe the Catholic Church, to a certain degree, understand what we try to do,
mm,
but wouldn't freely admit it. Another incident, very briefly, it was a neighbour. It looked as if she was about to pass away, and I was called up before the priest was called in, and I was aware this lady was actually starting to see the other world, and a mother and a daughter that's passed decades before I was born, and I could confirm where they were in the room. So she pointed to an area, and ma'am confirmed that's where I seen them. And the priest came in and said, nothing, we just acknowledged each other. And 2 days later, the lady still was with us then for another 3 years. The priest came in to her daughter and said, he was the young man on the bed with your mother. I said, oh, that's my neighbour's son. He's a medium. Or I thought as much. You could feel the peace in the room. So
mm.
I do feel that they do have a understanding, but it's like it's different tiers. Like us individuals shouldn't have that direct connection, but we can. We are all divine, and we can have that divine connection
Yeah.
individually. Some will have more of an openness and understanding of it and be able to reach in and see and feel and know. Others are just going with blind faith, and that's important as well.
Yeah. I definitely I love hearing that. And early on in my development, I did read the Seven Principles of Spiritualism, and but where I live, the closest spiritualist church is like, I don't know, 150-kilometer round trip.
Mhm.
And so they're not very common where I am compared to where you are in the world. And I just recently started researching how spiritualism went over to the UK from the US, where it was kind of like born. And so is that how you focused a lot of your development early on, was through the spiritualist church and spiritualist
Yeah.
circles?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
like going to the Arthur Finland College. I, I'd say now, when I started off in 2007 going over there, it was a weekend course,
Mm,
and it's like I was hooked. That was after I went to a first demonstration here in Dublin by a lady from Wales, and she told me I had to go. And
mm.
one day we'll actually end up doing a platform together. This is in front of 200 people. She's telling me this, and I'm thinking, oh, never. But we did do that years later. I served in her church in Wales, but and then she came to Dublin and we did vice versa. But going to Stansted, and I see in every 1.5 hour lesson I would have during a week, to being like my weekly circle. I treated it as
Mm.
that because I don't have that connection here at that time. It's a little bit more open. There's a little bit more understanding. There's a few other spiritual centres that have opened in Ireland over the last decade. Some of them are very spread out. So we don't have, like in England, you could have a church in nearly in every town, maybe a couple in a town, and that. So I just go over and I do workshops, or I'll go to services in the UK when I had the opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what I was drawn to the most around spiritualism, even though I never really attended a church or development circle, just was, I had two babies at home. So it just like wasn't in the realm of potential. But now with COVID, I attend 3 a week because
Yeah,
everything's online, and I'm like, awesome. So I can attend different spiritual services from around the world now. And it's just been so amazing, because what drew me to mediumship and what I really kind of hung on to really early in those years of developing was the philosophy. Like,
yeah,
I just love spiritual philosophy. And that's why I love attending these services. And I get the sense from you, even just hearing what you've had to say too, that that's very important to you as well.
it is. It is, and like part of it, like I would not have read the Bible or studied philosophy by any stretch of the imagination, and it's through the mediumship where philosophy has come through, particularly with my initial trance communicator. That was his thing. That was Sean's priority of coming forward with philosophy, a very Buddhist type of viewpoints with it. And the inspirational writing or speaking that I would do now certainly
Mm.
has a hint to that, but it's a very practical philosophy as well.
Yes.
And say we're talking about like just going natural with the interview process and let questions come up and we go with the flow. That's how I am with my inspirational speaking. Because if I think about something, me, Declan, person, and I want to include that in, if it doesn't come up, I start stuttering or I start
Mm.
getting annoyed, and because I'm not getting my points across. If I just allow spirit to come forward, a 15-20 minute speech can come out, and I'm aware of what I'm saying at the time, but at the end of it, I won't recall every word or every part of it because you're in the flow of that moment. And that's
Yeah.
what I love about the philosophy end of it when you're speaking, that you are removed temporarily from your physical consciousness and you're just allowing that flow of spirit through.
Yeah, so I love that. So, question about this, like to get into the details of it. So, when you're
Mhm.
doing your inspirational speaking, and obviously spirit is, pressing upon you like thoughts and, sensations, what does that feel like for you? So, you feel the presence of spirit when you're doing mediumship, demonstration, or one-on-one. Does it
Yeah.
feel the same when guides come through to speak through you?
In essence, it is. Like there's not a huge difference at this point for me. At the early stages of development, where I'm sure a lot of people would understand that you're trying to rationalize when you're feeling that connection, when it's not just you. And because initially it's going to be like 95, 97% you, 2-3% spirit, because they need to get your voice working and your channel going through, and you might feel like an essence of someone coming forward and standing next to you.
Mm.
Now it's to a point where, and when you do that, you kind of, okay, you have a lady standing this side of me, I have a gentleman standing this side of me, and you rationalize it and break it down. when you get used to it and you look more liberal and you can be free within that energy, they just come forward and blend and just touch your mind
Mm,
too. So it's like their thoughts are interwoven with my thoughts and they just come forward. And that's what they're trying to do with all mediums. It's just going to overlay their mind and their concept of thought with
mm.
yours. And it just blends together as one.
I love that. So I'm somebody who suffers with stage fright in big ways, right? Like I imagine, like I can't imagine standing up in front of people regularly in front of like audiences, just standing there doing inspirational speaking or, doing readings. Like, was that something you had to get used to, or is it just come really naturally to you? What was that process for you? Because you do a lot of demonstrations. That's one thing I've noticed through, I mean, obviously with COVID, things are very different, but
Mhm.
you used to always do like lots of different demonstrations. And I used to sit there like, wow, like, I can't believe somebody could stand in front of an audience like that. What was your process around that?
My first, I remember my very first time standing up. I was over in Arthur Finland College, and Muriel Tennant that I mentioned got me up on platform in front of about 60, 70 people and said to me, "How do you connect with spirit?" And I go, "Talk to me, guides. I don't know." And that, like, then I was getting comfortable, took my shoes off, sitting by the window, looking out the garden in this lecture. And I got a little bit of fragment of information through. And that built up then at the weekend where I was seeing stuff in front of me. I was hearing someone whisper into my ear, all these things. So like, but my nerves was a big part of that. And it took me a while to learn how to control my nerves and make that an empowering part too.
Mm,
So from going in front of a group with not knowing how to do it to I know how the mechanics of it. I'm used to doing this. I'll stand in front of a group of 10 people, 200 people. My nerve still is exactly the same. And I have to build that energy up. If I wasn't nervous, there's something wrong. I need to get
mm,
myself into that state because for me, I use that power to expand the auric field for my energy to command the space where I can hold that energy to a point that spirit can come forward and stand next to me. And then I can hear the whispers or I can feel the sensations as they blend temporarily with me as I'm communicating.
mm.
Like to every medium, that's going to be slightly different how that works. And like one medium I always say is when you see this auric field work with them, and how I know they get nerves beforehand at times too, and when they come forward and hold that presence of spirit, you can actually see spirit find you as you're watching them stand next to the medium and
Mm.
communicate. And I thought it's fantastic today to do that. So imagine we were able to do that with our nervous energy to build it to a point where people can actually see the silhouette of those standing next to us. And
Mm.
that's so it's a nice aspect to aim for. But with the nervousness, use it as a power, use it constructively and not destructively.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a game changer for me. Just hearing that, because I know not all nerves are created equal. And I know that, one thing that I was kind of feeling with my nerves is like, okay, this is kind of my nervous system activating as well, to make that connection. But I love how you talk about transforming it into something powerful. Use it as power because it is powerful. Nervousness is very powerful, right?
Right.
And so use it as building the power. I think that's really, really smart. So I'm going to try that next time. I'm
Yeah,
going to try
see,
that. Actually,
breathing in and out. And as you breathe in and out, those nervousness energy that is within you, that's breathing and expanding. But your auric field just keeps going out and out and out like a bigger balloon if you're inflating.
yeah, I love that. I'm going to do that next time. I'm actually right after this interview, I'm going to have to do a reading with my mentor. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to use that because we'll see
You
what
tell me how
happens.
that goes.
Yeah. So early on in your development, like, I mean, I went through a lot of this myself. This is what I talk a lot about on
Mhm.
Spirit School, but there was like a lot of fear, a lot of doubt, a lot of like limiting beliefs when it came to this work. I mean, my history was with race cars, right? And like nothing transferable to what it comes to mediumship. And so I had a lot of like limiting beliefs, like thinking like I wasn't that good or I wasn't that accurate or I was all fluff, like all these kind of like negative things that circulated in my head that I had to learn to kind of navigate and walk through over these past 8 years. Like, did you have any of that kind of when you were developing? What were the things you were worried about and how did you overcome them?
I I was always afraid I wouldn't get a detailed enough information or as accurate, and I was very reluctant to even slightly still now to do readings for friends or family because I know too much about them, and how
Mm,
much is my mind going to get in the way at this stage. But even earlier on, I wanted, am I accurate? Am I detailed? Am I perceiving this right? Is it in my mind? Am I making this up? But it's
mm,
only when spirit come back and give you evidence that you couldn't possibly know, or the detail that you go into is like, okay, that's not something that's in my awareness before. Like one gentleman, to give an account, one gentleman came forward from spirit and wouldn't tell me how he passed. Now, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But this is a bit of an extreme, but I understood why. He wouldn't tell me how he passed. All I knew is that I couldn't breathe. So some sort of asphyxiation. I couldn't, but he didn't take his own life by anything to do with strangulation or water or nothing like that.
mhm,
And all I kept getting was that and a little bit warm. That was it. Turns out he unfortunately set himself on fire. So that's why I
oh,
couldn't breathe. So it's like, okay, that's a bit of a shock factor, but it got me to understand what he was trying to imply by that. And I thought, I'll never get that again. And
mm.
that's so unique. Two other times, to two other individuals, the same thing
Wow.
that came up. Like months, maybe a couple of years apart, but he was a reference point then to that. So you're using information. That's like a very extreme end of the spectrum with it, but it gave me an understanding that we're constantly learning with it
Mm,
to get the proof that way, and that's going to be a recollection I can call upon when needs be if someone comes forward again with that. Other times it's just the detail of little what might seem insignificant for some people is so important for another individual as
yes.
well. Um, and sometimes it's the slightest thing said is what brings that person and spirit back to life and with the individual that's in front of you. I've had my moments with those and had eyes lit up and smiles from ear to ear. And it's like that was payment enough just to see that because they know their loved one is still there with them, watching them.
Yeah.
And those
Yeah.
things are you don't forget as
Yeah.
well. And then you get this part of you that I'm more confident with this now. I'm moving forward with it. I can get more detail and get to a point to say I'm a nosy medium. So if you want to know, it's I'm like the Miss Marple and Inspector Clouseau is the way I jokingly say to people because I want to get as much detail as possible as
Yeah.
well from that side, with very little being said from here as well, other than yes and no if they understand what I say.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why I say people or students should be starting off with try to get as detailed as possible. You're not being criticized in spirit or being critical of them by saying, give me more, because
Yeah.
they want you to see that you're able to do it. And they want you to encourage you to advance as well, to show what your potential can be.
Yes, I love that. And I'm always blown away too. I mean, I did strictly one-on-one readings for my first 6 years, and I just
Mhm.
started doing group stuff this or 2020.
Yeah.
And so I'm always really surprised at what people find to be great evidence, right? Like it's
Mhm.
so subjective. Like some
Yeah.
people, it took me forever to start getting names. And then ever since I started getting them, it's like people are like not as impressed. I'm like, it took me forever to get this. And
Yeah.
then like I would be in a reading and I would just say the word, like I had a reading last year and I just said the word candy. And she just like freaked out. It was like, that's like all I needed to hear. I was like, okay, still don't quite know what it means. And I think as mediums, especially developing ones, there's a lot of pressure about what type of evidence like we
Yeah.
need to bring through for it to be good,
Yeah.
right? In air quotes, good. And it seems to be from a medium perspective that I've seen, it's all the same thing. But when it comes to like the sitter and what they find to be valuable and important, it's so different. And I'm always amazed
Yeah.
at what they find to be that kind of like bomb moment, right?
Yeah, if I can give you a little sample of two little things. This week, yesterday, I got a phone call from a shop owner I used to go in merchandising, and he's a medium as well. And he said my name was in his head, so he had to phone me. I haven't seen him for about 4 months, and we're chatting away. And at the end of it, she said, "I think I know why you're phoning me today, and that it's my uncle's birthday." That his anniversary was last week. His name is the same name as the gentleman I'm talking to as well. And he said, "Did he like Scrabble?" He says to me and said, "Well, we played Scrabble Christmas night for the first time in 20 years." And
Yes.
then it turns out when I asked my mother, yeah, he liked kind of word games and that.
That
So
is awesome.
tiny little piece, he doesn't come true very often. That tiny little bit of evidence just to show that was my uncle coming true on his birthday, and from a random phone call.
Yes.
So that's all it needs to be to show they're around. And it is subjective. And what is evidence for one won't be evidence for another
Yeah.
as well. But once you know what you're doing with integrity is true, that's where you're doing a just service for spirit, and for the sitter as well.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, earlier, I wrote it down because I was like, I have so many questions for you still. It might seem like I'm
We
popcorn
can do a
popping all
part
over,
two.
but I really have so many things to ask you. Earlier, you talked about angels. And so, like being from Ireland, like one of the first angel books I read when angels first came to my awareness, it was like year two, because I didn't grow up with any religion at all.
Mhm.
So angels were not something that were very common for me growing up. No one ever talked about them. And then angels, when I started developing mediumship, really started to come into my awareness year two. And one of the first books I read was Angels in My Hair, which was from
Mhm.
Ireland, right? Lauren Bryn, and loved the book. Um, Anyways, so you mentioned them earlier. How do they come into mediumship, if at all?
See, that's the interesting thing when, okay, from a Catholic side, we have the angelic background and intrigue that way. Well, in spiritualism, we don't talk about angels because there's no evidence of them. So that's what that end of it, which I get a little bit confused by because one of our principles includes the angels, and that
Mm,
in a spirit in the ministry of angels, yet we can't prove it. But it's certainly something that's important to me. And angels, for me, in my philosophical way of thinking, they're not all winged creatures and that, but they will present themselves whatever way we perceive them to be, because it's better for our minds to understand them.
mhm.
But for me, they're more evolved souls, so that little bit more higher up in the echelons, within the spirit realm. So they are the messengers, they are the intermediaries. So who I call the mediums of mediums, and that in the
I
other
love that.
world is what comes to my mind at the moment. Um, so they're bringing that communication down, and some will present with having this large, um, let's say not feathery look, but it's like the winged look of energy that would be around them. So it's their auric fields of what we see, and that, and for some they will be perceived in the winged side of things, but they're certainly communicators and intermediaries of information and wisdom as well,
Mm,
guidance too. So we believe our guardian angels, and that's a big thing that would be within, let's say, the Catholic religions, the guardian angels, and in many other religions as well. That there's different variations of them, but they're souls that are there just to direct you along the way. So if you think of it, they're like the ushers in the cinema with the torch,
yeah.
shining the light on the pathway, and they intercede when needs be at times too, just to keep you on the right track, and maybe to raise your spirits, your mindset at times too. Little whispers in your ear, as Lauren Byrne had angels in my hair, and that's
Yeah.
a little shove or nudge in the right direction when needs be.
Yeah. I love that. I just asked because like I've had a hard time marrying mediumship and angels, and I
Mm.
have an equal interest in both, right? Like I love angel studies. I still study angels every single day. Same with mediumship. It's just a passion of mine. I did have an experience a couple years ago where this man showed up for a reading. It was actually meant for someone else in his family, but they couldn't show up, so they just sent him. And he
Yeah.
didn't know he was going to have a reading until like half an hour before. He's like, "Okay." I'm like, "Sir, have you ever had a reading before?" He's like, "No." And then immediately I was like, "Oh God," I'm like, "You're going to do this to me." I just felt angel energy all around him. I was like, "Sir, do you believe in angels?" He's like, "Well, I don't know." And what they brought through was evidence. Like they brought through this situation that happened to him when he was 17, where his life was spared and it shouldn't have been. And
Mhm.
the man just started weeping. It was like this presence
Yeah.
more than anything. It's like, I don't know why I'm crying. It's just like this like presence that kind of
Mm.
comes.
Yeah.
And that was the only time that's really happened. But I found it to be kind of interesting. And so I've been kind of like on this quest to understand like what is their involvement in mediumship or mediums, if anything. And that was the only time they really came through that strongly. But they come through for me all the time. Just again, feeling love more than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see them as very evolved souls. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. Okay, so one more thing before I go into the health thing, because I'm really interested about this. Because I've met a lot of really unhealthy mediums, and and you're probably the healthiest I've ever met in my life. And has anyone ever told you you look like Hugh Jackman?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
My nickname for my coach is actually Wolverine. And that, and do you know what? Earlier on today, I put up there was a TikTok I did last night. I'll send you to in private messenger, and it was me reacting to the Greatest Showman and the three stages of the first time you see it, you're sitting there and you're just smiling and enjoying. The second time you're dancing in the chair. The third time I'm actually dancing in the sitting room with it.
uh,
So
the
someone said I
greatest
look like
showman.
Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, you look totally like Hugh Jackman. I'm just sitting here. I'm like, this guy just looks like Hugh Jackman. I'm like, so if you're on the podcast, hop over to YouTube so you can see the video of how handsome Declan is, and he just looks. And The
Right.
Greatest Showman for me is like my favorite movie of all time. It was the most life affirming movie I've ever seen. I actually resigned from my job after
Right.
watching it because I was like, I can't waste my life. Like it was just, I felt so expansive. And if I do a demonstration, I did two before COVID. I would have
Yeah.
done them every month if lockdown didn't happen, but I listened to the Greatest Showman song before to try to like shake out my nerves and just kind of get my vibes up. It's kind of like
Mhm.
my jam song is the Greatest Showman. So anyways,
Yeah,
I'm
well,
always,
sure. When I do eventually go back to doing sittings for seances for physical mediumship, and that some of those songs just might be included.
yeah, you're like,
Can't be any more upbeat than that.
I went in the circle. Okay. Well, you actually just went where I was going to go next. Actually, funny. It was about physical mediumship. Because I've experienced one experience with physical mediumship, which I talk about in episode 100 for people who are interested, but it was a table levitating and table tipping experience. 10 o'clock in the morning, broad daylight. It went on for like an hour. We had to sit in a circle for almost 3.5 years to create the energy for
Yeah.
physical mediumship. Very devoted, very dedicated, same people, same time, same place. It was one of the most profound experiences I've ever had spiritually in my life. Like it actually brought me to my knees. I was so humbled by the power of spirit within that second. Now, have you seen the documentary on Netflix, Surviving Death yet?
Yeah, I know Nicola that's in it.
Oh, okay,
Um,
good. Yes, I saw you guys talking on Facebook actually. I was like, oh, Declan knows her. I can't believe I didn't remember that.
no, I
But
haven't
I
talked
want
to
to
her for a
ask.
while, but I do know her. Yeah.
Okay, because I saw you guys talking. I was like, oh, he knows her.
Yeah.
So I was all in watching this. I was like, oh my God, because I've obviously studied physical mediumship. I've only had that one experience myself. But I know that people who don't know so much about mediumship were a bit like unsure about that part of the documentary, the whole seance, the whole, like my parents were like, they're not mediums and they know I am. They live with me, but they're like, I didn't know what to think. I was a bit embarrassed. I was a bit like nervous for you. Like, what are people going to think about you after seeing that? And so people who just don't know, don't know. So I would love to ask you a little bit about seances and about like physical mediumship, some experiences you may have had. Like, tell us everything.
Well, my first, I didn't know what trance was to begin with, and the first week long course I booked ended up being near my birthday, and it ended up being trance. And so like they had me then within a couple of days speaking in the altered state for half an hour and thinking, I don't even know what I'm doing here, but it's happening. So, but with the trance energy and that you're not every medium is a trance medium, and not every trance medium is a physical medium. So
Okay.
they're, say, physical mediums are born, and they're very rare breed, and that's nothing special, but just rare.
Mhm.
But when I started going and trying to explore in trance, then that opened up doorways to physical mediumship and learning a little bit about it. And I went, my first experience of that with Stuart Alexander in Hull in Yorkshire in England. Um, I got to shake hands with spirit. So
Wow.
all through the seance, he was in a dark room. The door is all sealed off, and everything's taped around, so no beam of light can get through underneath the door, over the door. And that a red light is used in the room. And the reason why red light is used is its low frequency of the spectrum of light. So with ectoplasm that comes from the medium and the sitters, that energy is interwoven with energy from spirit and the sitters. It can form then objects, it can form rods and poles that will help levitate tables. And that way nobody is touching, everyone's holding hands, and the
Mhm.
table can lift up and drop. Um, but we can also get to a point where full materialization can happen, where, say, my grandmother could stand there in front of me, and medium or not medium, you'd see her, you'd hear her voice, and that would be independent voice that will go with that, or the voice box will develop and her voice will come through, which I'd be able to identify.
Mm.
But with Stuart, he was, as you see in that documentary, Nicola is tied down in the chair. Her ankles, her wrists are tied in, so it shows that she's not moving. And Stuart was like that. And underneath a table that was in front of us, between me and him, there was a red light and a glass top. So the red light shone through the top of the table. And it was like a heat haze out of the solar plexus. And out of that heat haze rolled like a liquid, that if the ectoplasm beginning to build up, and as it condensed down, like the stump of an arm formed, then the knuckles, then the hand formed. Picked my hand up, shook my hand, tapped it on the back of the hand, and then dematerialized back into the solar plexus. And all the time, I'm seeing Stuart's hands either side of the chair. So I'm watching these three hands in front of me from the one person, but
Wow.
one being from Walter, his guide, because he said, "Do you want to shake the hand of a dead man?" I was not going to say no.
Right.
So that was like, okay, I want to do this. I want to explore this. And then in 2011, before I had my own center, I started developing in this room with a few friends on a semi-regular basis, and then a little table, hands on it, it start moving and walking about. And I'd done that before without seance environments, but it got to a point where the table was moving across the room and nobody was touching the table.
Yeah.
This is only like a small little cross little table. It's used for like a TV dinner table, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
And then that start building and dancing around the room to the rhythm of river dance. Then we moved to a heavier table, and the same thing happened again. People hands on the table, then hands off it. Energy built up. It happened. And we use a seance cabinet like the way you'd see in the documentary. But my one is a funny one. I used a toilet tent.
Oh, wow.
I adapted the toilet tent as a seance cabinet, and it was one of these plastic camping ones, so it got very sweaty inside.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
but like that's just to condense the energy down into that space.
Mm.
Um, but so yeah, so that developed into a point where we did sit every week, every Monday night, 8 o'clock. When I had my own center for a year, every Monday night in that one room was dedicated to physical mediumship, and we had some lovely evidence come forward. And the only thing was I kept missing it all because I'm in trance, so I don't see any of this. So they
Right.
let me actually get to a point where they could still move the table and bring me out of the altered state. Well, we got to a point where we had matter through matter happening. So my hands and feet are cable tied to the chair, with a couple of cable ties. But at the end of the session, my hand would come loose. The cable tie is still intact in my arm, and it's still intact on the chair, but one dissolved through the other.
Oh.
Uh, and that was tied in by one of the most skeptical. There was a medium, but he was a skeptical medium. It's a nice way of putting it. He was a part of the circle, but he wants more and more proof. So he's a
Right.
good person to tie me in to make sure it was done right. So with physical mediumship, it can bring a huge amount of healing as well, but it's just a rare form. It takes years of development, as you know yourself now, that find it difficult to get the right people that will be dedicated to sit every night that you sit for years, no matter what family
Yeah.
occasions that come up, that they are there for that. Um,
Yeah.
but it's important that they dedicate to one person within the group as well that spirit have chosen, because if you keep alternating people, which some do that, and you get some amount of evidence building and phenomenon happening, but spirit can't focus the energy in that one individual's mechanics and how it
Right.
works with them. So when they focus on that one individual over time, they all benefit from it in the end.
Yes. Okay. So this is like the big question. You kind of addressed it and hoping you can elaborate on it, because this is a question that came up in my community where, okay, we know with mental mediumship and we know the one-on-one experience could be very healing for the sitter, but what is the point of a seance? Like, what is the intention? What is the takeaway for the people who experience and know that these seance and these physical manifestations exist?
For me, I've always left them and saying the world don't realize how close the other world is. I've said that from every single seance I've been in from the very beginning, and that there maybe minus a couple that I've been to that I had my doubts over,
Mhm.
but because I have to be rational in mind too, and I would be inquisitive and that's important. Unfortunately, over decades, that within seance environment, particularly because it's done in darkness, there has been some fraud being done as
Mhm.
well. So you have to have some sort of rationale also. Um, but to leave, that's the way I put it. When we have a loved one coming forward and they materialize, it can be very emotive. Even if it's just a voice coming forward and speaking through independent or direct voice, it can be very emotional for the receiver of that communication. And the expression known as a second death is experienced too. So if they've materialized and you see their face, they illuminate themselves, and that can happen. If it's done in a dark environment, spirit I know want to move forward with the development, so it's more visual and it's in more light conditions or in a very light, um, dimly lit room where fraud can be taken out of the equation altogether. Then because it's separate from the medium, but it can still be raw for the individual to have that experience, um, because they're losing that loved one all over again
Right.
too. So that could be a part of it. But it is one of the most beautiful feelings to be in, that you're stepping into the other world. And
Mm.
I give you a little joke as to that when I was doing our settings, my main control, we had a man in spirit on the door like a bouncer. And if your name's not down on my circle leader on that side, my main guides list, even my nanny couldn't come into the room on that side because
Wow.
her energy wouldn't be conducive for what they're trying to do. So if you weren't on
Right.
Albert's list, you didn't get in.
Wow.
So they have it orchestrated in such a way to get the most out of it. But I'd love to see that become a more common practice, but it just takes time for that to happen.
Yes, thank you so much. I had no idea we were going here today. When I got your bio, I was like, "Oh, he does physical mediumship," because I need to ask these questions because it's been a bit of a hot topic like since this documentary
Mm.
came out. And one of the people who haven't experienced maybe physical media, because I agree the atmosphere is just like nothing I'd ever experienced in my life.
Yeah,
I felt like I was in heaven, right?
yeah,
Even though if you put scary music on and you see this table flying across the room, it would look like poltergeist or something like that, which completely changed my mindset on paranormal activity as well,
yeah,
because there's so much love, there's so much presence, like you can't help but
yes,
be healed in that atmosphere. And
yeah,
through evidence with the table experience, we knew it was one of the girl's brothers, because
hmm,
he spelled his name out and it was actually his birthday and we were singing happy birthday. It was kind of cool. It was like a really kind of cool experience. And
yeah,
so I'm so grateful that you explained that, because I think that that is going to put some people's mind at ease when it comes to kind of negotiating what they
yeah.
saw versus like what's the point. So I appreciate that.
No problem. I'm
So
still at the very early stages of it, I will say. I still need to dedicate, when I do get my own home with David, that I told him already I'm having a seance room so
Yeah.
I can go proper development. So that's a part of buying a house. I need space for a seance room. I won't say that to an estate agent.
Yeah. And I so wish I lived in Ireland because I would like beg to be in your circle. I like that here. Like there literally, and that's a I think about the evolution of mediumship and how mediumship before we kind of went to mental mediumship was physical. Like it was like the
Mm,
automatic writing, the
yeah,
seances, like this is what mediumship was back in the day. And we just don't have the capacity, the attention span, the
yeah,
devotion to sit for
yeah.
spirit like we used to.
Yeah, if you look up Tom Harrison that and the Trumpet Circle on YouTube, you'll see the whole documentary dedicated, and that's the red light came from him. Well, likes of his family in that sitting for spirit for physical, using the embers of a fire as their light. So it's this
The trumpet circle on YouTube.
Trumpet Circle with Tom Harrison. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to link that in the show notes too for people because I want to see
Mhm.
it too. So I'll link it in the show notes for people. But okay, I will look at that. Very, very cool. So the last thing I really want to talk about with you, which I know like your passion is fitness, and I've been following your fitness journey since 2014. And so one philosophy I heard from Tony when I attended one of his retreats was, and I know you know Tony, I saw you guys were friends too, that sometimes mediums can be some of the most unhealthy people, like just what they eat and drink and smoke. And I know when I first started developing mediumship, I put on a bit of weight because I don't know if I was like grounding with food, but not like the best food. I was looking for like really dense food, like the sandwiches and like the wraps and stuff. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your fitness journey, what struck it. And I also want to know if it's like helped improve your mediumship, your energy levels, all that fun stuff.
But it's kind of funny that looking at back at photographs of me going to AFC and looking into from 2009, there's the big belly on me then. And but I know now I only came out of the closet in 2011, and that's where it was like a big shift happened with that, like mindset shift and like a energy shift, and my mediumship got better as well because I hadn't got this energy, emotional weight and baggage I was carrying
Mhm.
too. So I definitely felt that kind of come over me and release. It was a year later, I was in the following January in 2012, a photograph of me was taken when I was doing a workshop I was teaching a workshop in Norway. And I'm sitting amongst all these lovely ladies around me, and I'm right in the middle. And I was like, blessed art thou amongst women, was the expression that was used. And I looked at myself and seen a, a physical aspect of me I wasn't happy with. I jokingly called myself the Irish Buddha. Uh, because that's how I felt I looked in that photograph. And that spurred me on then to change. So yeah, Spirit had a hand in it in one little way, because if I wasn't there and that photograph wasn't taken, I wouldn't have made a change.
Mhm.
And I lost 1 stone within 6 weeks, and going to a boot camp and that, and then hit and miss with going to training. And I even before then I did do an odd PT session I went to, but I thought it was great going to the gym like once a month and that
Mhm.
type of thing. And I used to be very fit and active. I used to be involved in the Scouts in Ireland, and going hiking was a regular thing. And I did progressively see from being a Cub Scout leader at one point that the kids were more energized than I was, and I like out of breath, my asthma would kick in going on a hike and that. So I did over the years progressively see my health decline a little bit in the physical nature. But after that photograph was taken, the journey started, and I started to lose weight. Another medium friend of mine, she was a student, then became a good friend, got me to do that same year a marathon. So I had 9 months to train for the Dublin Marathon. And so I lost about a stone and a half. I did 8.5 hours of walking
Wow.
for that marathon. But it challenged me and pushed me on that little bit more. And Spirit kept saying to me as well that for me, from my journey, it's not for everyone else, but for my journey with physical mediumship, they'd like me to be healthier. So
Mm.
that's one element as what been on my mind. I want to get healthier for that, for whatever that is needed, whatever time in the future they want me to get healthier. So I did do that and signed up with my coach from Belfast again online. and that. So I'm used to working online with someone for a long period of time in 2014. So about the
Right.
same time you start following me, start working with Ben Mudge, and that went on from there. So 6.5 years working with him. And then I trained up then. I said years ago I was going to become a personal trainer, and yeah, kept pushing it down the road. Don't feel worthy enough. The same thing with the mediumship. Don't feel worthy enough. I don't have enough experience. And then when I did the photo shoot then in 2019, that the kind of bookend from my heaviest to my fittest.
Right.
That was
I remember that photo shoot, Declan.
I remember very well. And remember the very streaky tan that morning as well, because I never had spray tan done before. And I was told to have a light shower the next morning, because I got it done the day before the photo shoot. And I said, have a light shower the next morning, which I did, light, cool shower. And it just started streaking and running off me. So I bought more with me, and just I'm rubbing this lotion on me to try to get tanned that little bit more, what I felt were patches. So that's hence why some of my pictures, I can see the patches on it. Other people said they don't.
I don't think people are looking at patches, Declan.
But like I was amazed by it. And like my coach that day when the photographs were being taken, I hadn't even seen the photographs. I'm just in mid pose, and he's going like, oh my God. And he was shocked with what was happening. And so we joke about that. But for me, that was also about mindset change as well. It was like that focal point of setting your target on something and small manageable goals and achieving it. And the same principle applies to many aspects in life too, mediumship included. And I've always seen each year that's gone by at New Year's, I don't do a New Year's resolution, but I give myself 3 goals maybe to aim for in the year. It could be, I want my clairvoyance side to be a little bit brighter and more clear, or my clairaudience just to be a little bit louder. So there's little things like that to aim for. And with all these things, fitness and mediumship, stop using the words you can't.
Right.
I can't do this. I can't, because like that's what prevents us. We put that energy out there. Sure, I was told by spirit before, you want to see us, well, stop saying you don't.
Right.
So you don't hear us, well, stop saying that. So with the physical side of things, and I said I never get abs, and I did the whole thing before and get those belts he put on. You have to try to jiggle everything about inside to get the abs developed. Never worked. Just hard work and dedication and training and understanding. And I've just signed up and started to do a nutrition coaching course as well. So yeah, it's been a part of the journey, but I know it'll all come together as well. And I end up working in a gym studio now, where the owner has done Reiki too, and understanding of meditation and interested in some sort of spirituality. And we said soon enough we'll sit down and do meditations together. Never expected that.
Right. And this is kind of leading me to something I've never thought too much about, but in North America, maybe it's just a North America thing, I don't know. Like there's this kind of like, I'm in Canada, but I speak for my American clients as well. There's this like kind of like all or nothing thing where it's like full-time medium or bust, right? And so, but I see so many people out that way where mediumship is so much more common, and that's where like the best schools are, and some of the most amazing mediums come out of the UK and Ireland. And like here you are pursuing a whole bunch of other passions. So like your whole life, whole living is not doing mediumship, right?
No, like I tried doing that, and for me, I'd be very blunt, and like my journey has never had a huge amount of work with mediumship. I get nice pockets of work, and I've always been blessed and been grateful for the people that Spirit send to me for workshops and that, even if it's only 5 people at a time, because I know the people that work with me have a dedication and an integrity that counts much more than quantity, and that for me. So like I love when I travel and I work, and I was honored to go to Calgary a couple of times, and there was one small group the first time, and then it was like 2 larger groups the next time. Like word got about a little bit, but I enjoy doing that. I see it now as a hobby for me. I tried doing it as a living at one point, and it was a struggle. So that's why I'm a gardener. I'm a personal trainer. I'm an online coach now, but I'm going to see now mediumship as a hobby that I enjoy, and I have a passion for. And like with the lockdown now, I've decided to go back into more of my own development. I'm going to utilize this free time I've got to see what can happen.
Yeah.
All because last week I was walking locally and I looked up and seen the blue sky, but then I started seeing pastel pinks and reds and yellows and oranges as well. I was seeing a glimpse into the spirit world and their sky. And that's like, okay, you need to come back to us now. So
Yeah.
I'm doing my work as a personal trainer, and I am talking to my clients about what I do, and some of them are intrigued by it, which is interesting that way. So maybe at some point I combine it all together, but I never expected to work at a gym where when I went for the initial interview, there's a Ganesh on the wall.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's Nelson Mandela quotes and banners I used to sell and all these things. And the owner is interested in a form of spirituality, which gives us a bit of common ground to talk about.
Yeah, I love that. And I do believe that like when you declare like through mediumship development that you're going to be of service to spirit, the service may look different for everybody. And you can be of service outside of a paid reading and outside of like a demonstration. And I think you're kind of seeing that too with what you're doing with your career too. You're like,
It's a
oh,
way of life. It is a way of life. It's something that's going to be integrated in as well. And it's funny when I go to Italy to visit my sister, I sat down at lunch and ended up communicating with spirit for 2 hours of a conversation with their loved ones.
yeah.
I've actually learned some Italian words from doing spirit communication.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, this has been so much fun to get to know you better, Declan, after, I don't know, 7 years of
Likewise.
lurking on your wall. And I know that the Spirit School listeners are really going to enjoy this interview. So do you want to tell people how they can follow your journey? I know I will tag your Instagram account, which is very fitness focused. You can see the photo shoot we're talking about. But anything else you just want to share?
Years ago now, I'm working my way back to that.
You're great. You're great.
But, so mainly on Facebook, it'd be I am Spiritualists, and that or is Declan Flynn Spiritualist Medium. There's a couple of pages there on Facebook. I don't have a website anymore for that work. As I said, I'm just going to keep the Facebook pages that's there. But I am Spiritualist to be the main one, and then you have Declan Flynn Fitness as well on Instagram and on Facebook.
Awesome. And I'll have those linked below too, so you can just go access them quickly. Well, thank you so much, Declan.
Thank you very much, and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Awesome. Me too.